Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're now with me, Muhammad Yusuf, for TVS News at 5. Let us begin with our top story. Now, on Saturday, July 23rd, the World Health Organization, WHO, declared the rapidly spreading monkeypox as a global health emergency with the highest level of alert. This will prompt a coordinated international response in terms of funding and collaboration on sharing vaccines and treatments. The announcement was made by Director General of WHO, Tedros Ghebreyesus, who made a clear indicator that the organization's expert committee could not reach consensus whether to announce monkeypox as a global pandemic or not.
And there are now more than 16,000 reported cases from 75 countries and territories and 5 deaths. Although I'm declaring a public health emergency of international concern, for the moment, this is an outbreak that's concentrated among men who have sex with men, especially those with multiple sexual partners. That means that this is an outbreak that can be stopped with the right strategies in the right groups.
At the moment, monkeypox vaccines are secured by countries that have reported cases of the disease. WHO is currently in discussion to procure the vaccine from its manufacturers.
When this vaccine is given in a pre-exposure context, it is not like giving an antiviral. It takes time for vaccines to work, and in this case, it can take up to 3 weeks, I believe, for this vaccine to take full effect. So being vaccinated does not give you instant protection. The best way to avoid this infection is to avoid being exposed to it, and if you are exposed to it, to avoid being the person that transmits that further to somebody else.
Monkeypox spreads via close contact and causes flu-like symptoms and pus-filled skin lesions. The recent outbreak was an astonishment to many, as it rarely crosses the borders of Africa, where it is endemic. Now, it's been less than a day after Ukraine and Russia signed an agreement to allow the resumption of grain exports, which aims to ease the global food crisis caused by the war. Even though an agreement was made, farmers in Ukraine had cast their doubts over Russia's willingness to comply with the deal, as Russia has recently launched an attack on several grain facilities located in Odessa.
Для мене вона нічого не говорить, ця угода. Тому що заключати, як може там Турція, ООН заключати угод з країною, яка, і всі про це знають, яка не виконує своїх угод, і вона може в будь-який час порушити їх. І це постійно відбувається, всі це знають, всі це бачать, і знову заключаємо ми угоду.
Ukraine is now flooded with tons of grains, which they have to sell at dumping prices, as many have run out of space to store the commodity needed by many parts of the world. Those with financial capabilities are able to hold and store their grain, while many factories are flooded with stocks produced as early as last year. Alexander also suggests that the agreement is made to benefit certain parties, but not the farmers themselves.
Якщо це дійсно угода запрацює, і зерно піде через порти Одеси і Одеської області, хоча б, то, звичайно, це зменшить логістику, і за рахунок цього ціни мають нам дещо піднятися. Але мені невідомо, скільки ми маємо заплатити за ці угоди, чи за той конвой, який би був би, скільки грошей ляже якраз на фермера, що він має за це заплатити. Хто за це має платити? Міжнародне товариство, країни ті, хто потребує зерна, чи ті, хто виробляє це зерно.
Now onto our local news. More tourist-friendly infrastructure is needed in Sarawak to attract more tourists. Walkways or lanes that are designed with historical images and information are some of the ways to provide an interactive experience to tourists, be it domestically or internationally. This is the main goal for Cebu's new attraction, dubbed the Cebu Heritage Trail.
Cebu mempunyai heritage dan latar belakangnya tersendiri. Dan sudah tentu heritage ini akan dipertahankan Dan saya percaya bahawa Menteri Pelancongan kita dan rakan-rakannya dalam kementerian akan mewujudkan satu heritage trail bagi Bandar Sibu.
Abang Johari spoke during the closing ceremony of the Borneo Cultural Festival held at Dataran Tun Tuanku Haji Bujang on Saturday, July 23rd. Several historical locations and buildings in Sibu have also been identified to be part of the heritage trail.
Tempat-tempat bersejarah akan dilihat dan disambungkan, dihubungkan dengan hub-hub yang lain. Dan dari sudut itu, Sibu mempunyai beberapa tempat-tempat yang bersejarah. Umpamanya, dataran Sibu ini, kawasannya berdekatan dengan dataran seperti Laukenggo Hospital dan juga tempat-tempat riadah seperti di Bukit Lima akan menjadi satu daripada trail yang boleh menarik para pelancong untuk melawat Sibu.
The Premier also told his deputy, Datuk Seri Dr. Sim Kui Hyun, to work together with the Ministry of Tourism to identify a method which will enable the trail to be established smoothly as part of the Sibu re-urbanization plan. Technology should also play a vital part when developing the plan. This is TVS News at 5. Now, the pandemic has forced people to readjust their lives overnight. Such drastic measures have also sparked life changes such as in health, career choices and relocations. Meanwhile, those who grew accustomed to the pre-pandemic lifestyle are bereaved with the new way of the new normal. Now, earlier this week, we had the opportunity to talk with a counsellor, Adrian Albert, about the post-pandemic effects that may come with grief.
Those who experience the loss of a loved one during the pandemic may have a long-term effect. Identifying grief is often the first step. However, just as each person's experience of grief is unique, coping strategies work differently for each person.
How do we cope with the grieving period? It varies from person to person also. For example, some people might be comfortable not to talk about it. Some people might be comfortable to talk about it. But as research shows that people who talk about their grief, to share about their grief in a common community such as support group or with a counselor, with a therapist, actually handles the grief more. And for person to person, it's very from person to person, right? So coping is really individualized. Some people may say it's okay that I keep the grief alone, and they get better after years or months or even 10 to 20 years. Or some people, they need to express their grief to someone. So that is the how to cope with grief is varying from person to person.
According to Adrian, the effects of grief on mental health could cause one to go into isolation for a period of time, leading to a series of addiction as a mean of escape. This could lead to addiction if grieving period is prolonged.
So apart from depression, anxiety, you talk about addiction. Yeah? Addiction is actually when they are addicted to something, is actually a part of the maladaptive coping skills. The skills that they are not really able to express their grief, and they regress their grief into something else. For example, addicted to alcohol is the most common one. They are sad, they are not able to express their emotions. The only way they are expressing their emotions is through alcohol. That is one of the examples of addiction cases, apart from mental health cases like depression and anxiety. But then again, it is very individualized, and then there are some cases that I personally see here, and there are some cases also they are not going towards addiction.
At the same time, Adrian said that there are short and long-term solutions to nurse grief.
So the most healthy way to deal with grief, I'm talking on research-wise, the most healthy way to deal with grief is, number one, get your support system. Support system might be family, might be friends, might be your co-workers, might be your colleagues. So a healthy support system really helps you in coping with grief. And research shows that when you talk about grief often, you share it to your support system, you share it to someone who trusts, you actually can release a bit of that intense emotions caused by grief. And that is, in my opinion, that is one of the healthy ways that you can cope with grief. Apart from denying it, apart from doing all those things, it's actually accepting or actually acknowledging that you are grieving, acknowledging that this is what is happening to me, that I have to do this, set my goals, meet my support group, talk about it, and then move on from there. So the main healthy point for you to cope with your grief is that you actually talk about it, share about it, and find people who you can trust.
Israeli forces engaged in a pre-dawn battle in the occupied West Bank, killed 2 Palestinian militants, while 6 more were wounded in a Palestinian house in Nablus. The forces, on an apparent raid outside the house of a wanted suspect, came under fire from the gunmen and responded with live fire and other means to neutralize the threat. Nasser Etitia, a witness, heard gunshots from inside the house before Israeli forces fired heavily at the house. Hussein al-Sheikh, a senior Palestinian official, said on Twitter that Palestine strongly condemned this crime and that they hold the occupation responsible for its repercussions. He added that this was another crime committed by the occupation forces, where martyrs have fallen and many are wounded. U.S. brokered peace talks to establish a Palestinian state in Jerusalem show no sign of revival since they collapsed in 2014. See the world closer with TVS as we bring you the latest news updates, both locally and internationally, just a click away by heading onto our website at www.tvstv.my or follow us on our social media platforms. That's all the time we have for TVS News at 5. Come in at 11 p.m. tonight for The Nightline with Lorenzo Isaac. I'm Muhammad Yusuf. Thank you for watching and have a good day ahead.